Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I start with a sound check. Maybe if you can all put it's 24. Channel 2 is a Brazilian football. Channel 24 is this event. Sir, can you hear me? Okay. Crunchy. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to the next event entitled Cutting the Waste: How Climate Plans Help Leverage Action on Food Loss and Waste for People, Planet, and Nature. I want to thank those of you who've made it here to the NDC Partnership Pavilion. And I thank the team from the NDC Partnership for hosting us today. There is a particular reason of why we're here, because this year, as we all know, is a big one. It is, among other things, the time when countries submit their latest NDCs, their national climate plans, and that's just part of what makes COP30 such an important occasion. My name is Cecil Haferkamp. I'm with the SDSN, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and I'm very happy to facilitate this event on behalf of the Global Action Drive to reduce food loss and waste. And we have organized this in collaboration also with the Global Food Banking Network and other partners. So thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. My job today is to be your moderator, but we have very interesting speakers on the subject. This is also a good time because we heard that yesterday there was a breakthrough, a food waste breakthrough, which goes another step forward in putting food waste on the political agenda. But I think we didn't need, this is not the first time that food waste is on the global agenda. Food waste, as everybody knows, and loss as well, are part of the SDGs, 12.3 to be exact. It's also mentioned in the Global Biodiversity Framework, and it has been identified repeatedly by the IPCC as one of key areas for mitigation potential to achieve decarbonization of economies. So much from my end to frame this. So there's enough reasons to talk about this at a climate COP. We have several speakers here that I briefly introduced, but I ask them when they take the floor to maybe elaborate on that. So first of all, we have a colleague from UNEP, Rafael, who among other things is a focal point for food loss and waste to understand, and he can help us look at the issue in a broader framing. We then have several speakers from the Food and Land Use Coalition and WRI in Brazil, Virginia Antonioli, who is a senior program manager there. We have Ana Catalina Suarez Peña, if I say this correctly, who is a senior director of strategy and innovation at the Global Food Banking Network. We have Dana Gundas, I hope I pronounced that one all right, who's president of ReFed, one of the major US-based nonprofits focused on stopping waste of food, and who has also a key role under the Champions Initiative 12.3. And then, last but not least, of course, we have Amanda McKee from the NDC Partnership, one of our hosts. But besides being a host, she has been very frequently involved in discussions of the Global Action Drive to help us navigate, to make sure that the work that we as an NGO, as a consortium of NGOs are doing, really linked up with the Paris process and especially with the NDCs. So thank you so much. Just checking whether I have forgotten anyone. Everybody else, of course, is welcome, not by name. I want to maybe point out Michael Oko from also Global Food Banking Network, one of our partners here. So with that, of time, just to frame it, I think we have more slides. Not for me to speak any longer, but here you see the names. I could have used this one before. So if you want to, exactly. Yes. You are, shoot, yes, you are there. And you're welcome to come to the front seats as well. Again, the Global Action Drive, in case you don't know, is a consortium of several NGOs. You see them here on the right side, coming together and see how they can coordinate and address the issue together. It's supported by the Robertson Foundation, and we have worked closely, as I said, with the NDC partnership. Previous to COP and already going back into last year, we have developed a call to action, and we have looked at NDC specifically as an opportunity to raise the profile of food loss and food waste issues. This QR code will help you to get there. It's not read, but it really summarizes the rationale for the integration of food loss and waste issues in climate policies and plans. And something we can maybe come back to in the discussion are the main points of the call to action. You will not be surprised to see them. I'm not reading them here now, but we can pull them out later again, and you can also access them yourself. I wonder whether I come back to the... So maybe I would now at this stage ask Rafael if he wants to, from his perspective and on behalf of UNEP, speak a bit about the relevance of addressing food loss and waste in the bigger picture, both the environmental agenda, but also cutting across agendas, climate, nature, development. Would be wonderful to hear from you, and then we can take it up from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me well? Okay. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. We appreciate the invitation. Martina Otto, the head of the Secretariat, should be here, but I imagine you can understand why we are having so many events. It was something unexpected that she had right now, but she would gladly be here, so I'm here covering. But at the same time, I'm also the coordinator for Low-WAM initiative that we have the honor to have. Both everything that is here, I mean, WRI, REFED, and GFN as well, they are part of the initiative. So I mean, if I needed to talk about the subject from this intersection point of view, that's cutting across so many agendas. So not just increasing food security, which should be obviously reason enough for us to act. It should be a completely no-brainer that's impressive. It should justify and should be necessary to convince anyone just by saying this. All the resources that are spent, all the hard work, and all natural resources and fertilizer and everything that is put to waste when you have food waste, it doesn't matter when in the value chain it takes place, it should be reason enough to convince any decision maker to take action. So I'll just skip this part because for sure the colleagues here will speak about this and way better than I ever could. So I'll just be focusing on the intersection and how we can talk about development, especially in climate, and how we deal with it at UNEP. I'll try to be brief because I know this remark should last about 5 minutes, so I'll stick to this time. So at UNEP, we are building on a couple of previous initiatives, and I could go at first, I mean, if we're not going back to the SDGs, recently at COP28, Low-WAM was launched. Low-WAM stands for Lowering Methane Emissions from Organic Waste. And it's how we act at the subnational level. We create a very wide consortium, and we act in different fronts, but we mostly focus on following waste management hierarchy. And that's completely aligned with the approach we are putting forward here in this true community that I see around myself, because we should always start with avoiding waste generation and obviously avoiding emissions. So if we skip the part that food should remain food, obviously, if we talk about emissions, that's where we should start. So if we, for example, if we prioritized actions such as biogas capture from landfills, we could just reinforce these vicious cycles that we should keep feeding organic waste to landfills. So how to avoid this? We must start at the source, and we must first make sure that food remains food. Food is not diverted to or directed to landfills. And just afterwards, we can start thinking about other measures going down the value chain. So at midstream and downstream. So starting at upstream, we can also contribute to countries to mitigate emissions at, I mean, it's all, I can only see advantages because at a lower cost, it's so obvious. So that's what we have been doing at UNEP in general, but at CCAC in particular, we provide technical assistance to countries to elaborate their NDCs. So in Brazil, I mean, since we are here in Brazil as the host country of COP, I'll just talk a little bit about this before I close. So in Brazil, we supported the government to develop its national climate change plan, and at the waste session and the agriculture, we created this intersection. We prioritized dealing with food as from this perspective. Food should remain food, and when we talk about waste, we should follow the waste hierarchy, waste management hierarchy. And that's what we did. We found a partner that was willing. I mean, it's already implementing policies under this perspective. And we have been very successful. We may have at the end of COP probably the launch of Plano Clima, the National Climate Change Plan. They'll have at least a presentation about the plan. And you'll be able to see it was supported by CCAC, but also by other parts of UNEP. And at UNEP, just to make sure, I mean, I've seen a figure here that impressed me. I could finish with that. If food waste were a country, we would be talking about the third largest emitting country in the world. And that's always impressive. It's good to convince people using those figures. It makes everything simpler to understand, even though I think that preventing food waste should be simple enough. But thank you. I'm available here to answer any questions you may have. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Rafael. Very good. And maybe we stay in Brazil, where you ended. We have Virginia here from the Food and Land Use Coalition in Brazil. Maybe you can pick it up there. What is FOLU doing in Brazil? How does it fit into this notion of food system transformation? And maybe, again, specifically involvement, engagement around the NDC, the policy framework. Maybe you can reflect on that. That'd be wonderful.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you, Sasso. Thank you, everybody, for the invitation. And I'm really, really happy to be here because this is an agenda, as we were talking before, that I've followed very closely for many, many years throughout my career. I stepped away from it specifically for the past couple of years. So this is an opportunity to hear from people that I really admire, people, institutions. So I really see this as a conversation, as a way for me to learn, for us to learn from each other. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. So from the Food and Land Use Coalition perspective, we're very involved in policy development, right? And we were following very closely the process of developing the Plano Clima, so Brazil's climate plan. So something that I'd like to maybe reflect a little bit about with you, it's this, as you were saying before also, Rafael, food loss and waste is an aspect that it should be a very positive agenda, right? So it's an agenda in which we can see clear wins. We can see from the loss side, the perspective of like increasing productivity or increasing the amount of food that we're putting out to better using our inputs, our supply chains. And from the loss perspective, of course, we can think about households and better utilizing the food that we've already produced. Then why is it so hard to integrate it into policy? Why is it so hard to integrate it into climate action and climate plans? There's a lot of aspects to this, we know it, but it's also because it's a very diffuse agenda. So it takes many different links of very complex supply chains from even before the field to after households. So it's a complicated issue to, on one hand, even comprehend sometimes, and I can speak from the Brazilian perspective of how large our supply chains are, how much food we export, we produce, how big our cities are, how complex even our waste management systems are. So that's one perspective. And of course, the role of scientists and civil society organizations, research institutions, is to utilize science, modeling, data collection to try and make sense of it, right? So this is one of the main reasons why I think we still have a lot of difficulty putting these very, I'd say, win-win scenarios into policy, because we're looking at waste management policy again, we're looking at even food security policy, we're looking at school meals on one perspective. You're Brazilian, you know this, there's this discussion there. And then to leverage it to climate policy, it's even a step further, right? Because then you add the layer of utilizing factors that might contain agricultural factors of production to also methane emissions. All of this to say, and I don't want to sound like it's not possible, because it is, but I think it's important also for us to be aware of the size of the challenge that us here in this room and other partners are tackling, right? So coming back to the point of how do we connect food loss and waste avoidance and reduction to national, let's say subnational, national policies, and then plans for the climate, right? So to reinforce this point, measurement, that's very important. We can't undermine it. A lot of us here are working on this, and I'm excited to hear from all of you how you're tackling this. I know there's been research on granularity in some cities here in Brazil, I believe in 2022, right? Which really helped us put together at least an understanding of household waste, which is now informing policies for waste management. And one thing that I think is really exciting, and I personally and other colleagues I know are very interested in seeing how it's going to develop, is that Brazil put together its interministerial strategy for food loss and waste. It's the second one, right? I was very involved in the first one. The second one, I'm just hoping it goes well and looking to see how it goes. But I've seen that there is a target, a specific target, to have a framework for measurement by 2027. And this is something that I think everybody that works in a Latin America, a Brazilian ecosystem should be looking at. I think we can all contribute, because then if we can use this interministerial structure, it's a lot of advocacy to put this together in a national scale. So we have something there that we can attach this sort of measurement perspective, which I really believe is going to be very useful. And then we start linking it to climate action and climate policy, because then the frameworks to calculate how much emissions we can avoid, then we can link it together. So as you were saying, like the waste hierarchy, there's also the policy hierarchy, which I think it's important for us to keep in mind, right? Not to say, again, it's not possible. My ask and my excitement is to use the momentum that we have with the COP in Brazil, with the interministerial strategy, with the Plano Clima, which already has the climate plan, which already has waste directly mentioned there. So I think it's this, like if we look, Brazilian NDC doesn't have food loss and waste in it yet, but I really believe we have the means to make it happen if we work together here, if we use the methodologies that we can use. So this is the perspective that FOLU has in this process of trying to link these pieces together between research and between policy making, which we really believe works. I believe for now, that's it. If you have any other questions or thoughts or reflections, I'd be happy to take them, and excited to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. Yeah, and I would even add there's also a ministerial hierarchy, right? There is, we know, is part of life, and when you deal with government, understanding the hierarchy is an important part of getting anything done. Ana Catalina, you are working not just in one country, you work with different governments. Would love to hear from you what your experience is with kind of making the case for integrating food loss and waste, or food loss and food waste, in government strategies, maybe specifically, but not only the NDCs. And then maybe a second question. I think we're too close together. And then the second question, you're also involved in something that's directly related here to COP, and that is the action agenda. But first on your first question, and then we come to the other one.
Cecil, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And Virginia, I just echoing what you are saying, is really nice to be with these amazing partners. We are working with all of you, low methane, the work that we are doing with WRI, FOLU, of course with REFIT in the United States is very important. And I just want to say hello to people that is seeing us, watching us, because I am receiving some messages that the connection is working very well. Okay. Then it's going to have it's not just the people that we are seeing here, it's the people that is connected. And thank you very much for taking the time to stay with us. Cecil, the first thing that we want to say is I am part of the Global Food Banking Network. It's a global organization working in more than 55 countries. This organization is recognizing a very traditional like a traditional action that were made by communities that is sharing food. This is not something that we created. It has been happening in the indigenous populations, in traditional communities. Then what we do is we promote and work with all the private sector, from the agriculture sector until hospitality sector, including retailers, manufacturers, agro-exporters companies, to invite them that the food, the surplus food that they couldn't sell, but is still following food safety rules, is not loss or waste. And what we do is following again very important food safety rules. We recover that food and we redistribute that food to people in need. Last year, we prevented that 500 million kilograms of food to be lost or wasted. And thanks to that amount of food that we prevented, that allow us to feed more than 38 million people. And this is something that you had been, Cecil, mentioning a lot. The interconnection between hunger, climate. When we are speaking about food loss and waste, it's not just an issue about climate, it's not just about emissions. I'm going to speak a little bit about that. It's a hunger issue. 30% of the total food that can help us to feed people today is lost or wasted. Then that play an important role. This is like the first big picture that I want to put on the table. Just going to answer directly the question. 3 years ago, in collaboration with Global Methane Hub, we started to measure the amount of emissions avoidance by every ton of food that is prevented to be lost or wasted. That is allowing us today to say that all the food banks that are working across the world to prevent food loss and waste are preventing between 2 to 3 tons of emissions by every ton of food that is recovered and redistributed to people in need. That are the climate benefits, but that is having nutritional benefits too. That is allowing us to feed people, but we are measuring the nutritional and the co-benefits. And I'm very glad that the MSM was launched today, recognizing the importance to reduce organic waste. And Rafael is not just mentioning organic waste, he's mentioning food loss and waste. And this is very interesting because it's the first time that we are seeing the interconnection between waste, organic waste, and food loss and waste as a relevant conversation on the climate space. And I think is the work of many organizations across the world. We are coming from speaking about food systems in the climate space, and after having the declaration in Dubai about the food systems, we need to say thank you to the climate champions because they had been playing an important role in that achievement. And after we have the organic waste declaration in Baku, and now we have for first time in this space, like Rafael, how many sessions we have been doing about organic food loss and waste? This has been huge this year. Then this is very important because it's recognizing that we need to talk about climate, we need to talk about mitigation, but we need to talk about adaptation. And I want to say thank you to the COP30 presidency, and to the Brazil government, because put the people in the center of the climate conversation. Then we, as GFN, we are saying this is for the people and the planet together, and that is the main conversation. Based in that methodology that is allowing us to measure the social and the climate benefits and impact of the work that the food banks are doing, we are working in country with the governments, with the agriculture ministers, with the environmental ministers. As we know, there are many laws regulating organic waste in countries. What we found was a way to model the amount of emissions that through food recovery and redistributions the countries can achieve by 2030 and 2035. What we are doing with the technical teams in the ministers is providing them technical assistance and providing them all this modeling and forecasting about the emissions that we can avoid by reducing the amount of food that is arriving on landfills. And that is allowing us, I will say that has been a the amount of achievement that we have been doing during the last 4 weeks are huge. We started with Chile. Chile was the first country that was including food loss and waste in their own strategy. But something that was very interesting in the Chileans NDC, that was in the circular economy chapter inside the mitigation part of the NDC. After that, we have Cote d'Ivoire announcing including food loss and waste as a general element that they need to have. We have South Africa announcing food loss and waste and food security together as the work that the country must to do. And Cecil, I know that you were under organizations where you are part, you were participating very.
Fed does in the US, but I think with a broader perspective. And then also ReFed as part of the Champions Initiative and as part of the Global Action Drive. So if we could ask you, zooming out from country, regional, even broader, what is the role of external partners like the Global Action Drive in this? The goal obviously is to support in-country work driven by policy, implemented and framed and with accountability that is local. But there is a role for global and international actors in that space. So if you could share a little bit what the experience was under the Champions and the Global Action Drive as well.
Yes. And can you hear me at all? I'm hearing like a radio. Okay. Yeah, so just a quick bit about ReFed. We are based in the US. Most of our work is in the US, and we very much focus on data and providing kind of the foundation for action through data. That action includes businesses taking action, and so we work with the food industry. We have a whole platform that we run with a majority of the grocery chains in the US, as well as food service institutions, and now the quick service, so different sectors within the food system. It also means finance, and so we work to try to model the what solutions are necessary, and then what it will take to finance those solutions, and not just how much money. Can you hear me? Not just how much money, but also who should pay, what types of investments. So we actually break it down into 9 different types of capital, everything from government grants or government finance to philanthropy, and also corporate finance. Some of these investments are just things we need companies to invest in. So we have that whole analysis. It's been used in all sorts of different ways in the US. And you're welcome to go visit it at our site. We're at refed.org, and we call it the Insights Engine. And you can click around and understand all sorts of different ways to slice and dice the information, depending on who you are, how you want to use it. It's been used 250,000 times or more at this point. We have seen the US government use it, and actually not just the tool we have out there, but our information behind it. So back when the US government was creating a methane action plan and those sorts of things, we were helping inform that methane action plan. Well, how much methane can be avoided? Also, how much will it cost? And who's going to pay? And if the government puts, $3 billion into it, then what other money is that going to unlock out of the private capital market, out of corporate finance? And so they could have talking points to go back to their partners in government and say, hey, yes, we need to put, $2 billion in here, but it's going to unlock another 10 billion in external finance. So I think the data has been used that way. It's been used at the state level to come up with action plans. So the state of Oregon, the state of Washington have both used these analyses to say, what are we going to do in our state? We have a goal. Now what do we do? Okay, here are 15 different things we can do. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's who we should reach out to pay for that, etc. So that's within the US. But you asked about kind of internationally, right? And I've been really, interested. We are primarily US. I'm still learning kind of the mechanisms of global, policy making and commitments and financing. But what I have found interesting is that I think in this process and the Global Action Drive, we have a number of partners. Anna Catalina here has done so much work to get different governments to include this in their NDCs, and I know the NDC partnership has as well. And then, so at that country level, if it gets into the NDC, I think what's important is then it can access more financing, right? Because the financing part of this is so important. Whether you're talking about infrastructure for diverting food from landfills, you need to collect it separately. It needs to be processed separately. That's really expensive. Though less expensive than some other methane solutions, right? If you're talking about food donation, there are costs to that as well, and you need infrastructure to manage that food. In fact, it's more costly, right? And sometimes because you need to keep the food cold and you need to keep it safe. And so when you're talking about governments investing in that, it is kind of government level finance that you need. And I think having this in NDCs can not only show commitment, but it can unlock the financing. Then you have programs like LOM, which has also done some really interesting things at the city level, because so much of the waste is happening in cities around the world. And they've been doing these analyses as well to provide data, to then inform financing, to then make action happen. And so I think it's really kind of, we're seeing that standard formula. In the end, wasting less food sometimes pays for itself. Sometimes it makes money, saves money, right? Sometimes it pays for itself, whether you're talking about, food donation that needs some upfront investment, but can pay for itself in terms of helping people thrive in the community. So you can dig into different pots of financing, from social services to climate to waste management. And then in the waste side, sometimes when you're doing waste diversion, it separates it to be able to be processed more close. And so you're talking about trucks that can be taking food waste closer instead of sitting in traffic and going 4 hours away to wherever the landfill is, as well as extending landfill life. So I think there's a lot of points. The collaboration we've had has been really successful so far. It's been really exciting to see all of these new countries come on board. And I think the ability to support that with data and with kind of this group who has been able to access, different financing levers as well has been powerful.
Thank you so much. Another very important perspective on this. Maybe I could ask an applause for our four, how should I say, more sectoral experts before we come to Amanda. Now, Amanda is someone who doesn't spend, yes, thank you so much. I say this tongue in cheek, but most of you four spent a considerable part of your work on food loss and waste, some more, and maybe others less. But then there is also... Yes, Rafael?
I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be rude at all. It's just because I have no control over my agenda.
You're pulled out.
I'm really sorry about this. Just to finish here on the climate,
Please do.
A very brief comment on the plans to accelerate solutions.
Okay.
That we had many of the partners involved here. So this is already something that goes beyond. It's truly treating it as a climate matter as well, because it's not just waste as one of the 5 IPCC sectors. On the plan to accelerate solutions that deals with waste, food waste prevention is at the heart of it. So it's already recognizing how we should also deal with it as a climate issue. So it helps us to achieve this very ambitious goal that we have to. So just to finish with that, I'm really sorry, and I'm thankful for the invitation.
No, we're grateful you could make it here.
I'm sorry to cut the line.
No. But actually, it's also a segue. Thank you, Rafael, for joining us. Now, as it was said before, this is the first COP where we see a more elaborate and maybe more ambitious action agenda. So I hope Amanda can fill a little bit in how, for the NDC partnership that is linked to the NDC process, I think there were concerns in the past over how to bring things together. Many of you might remember when the COP presidency launched the action agenda, it started with a mapping of initiatives. And not everyone, but some people were quite surprised by the high number of initiatives. And the question is, how does it relate to, how should I say, NDC core business? So Amanda, thank you for coming and joining us for this. How do you see these things relate? How do you see for people like us, so kind of non-state actors that are very interested in supporting and leveraging government and private sector action? How can we do this in a smart way, leveraging the action agenda to leverage NDCs, not as an externally imposing, but a really supportive process going forward?
Thank you, and I appreciate you introducing me as a non-expert on this topic. I really enjoyed listening to that. That was extremely fascinating, and one of the things I love about these panels, just learning so much about our topic. I'm going to talk from the perspective of NDCs.
No offense intended, by the way.
No, I know that, and I didn't want you to think I was going to bring any insights on food loss and waste, but I think hopefully I can bring you some insights on the NDC process overall and where I see some opportunities to build on it. And I already heard some of it in the discussion today, but you know, initiatives like the Global Action Drive are really critical to actually support national commitments and take them forward and embed them into processes that can help give them a platform. We had this conversation about embedding this in the NDCs and getting that reference. And I have to admit, I think there was a point earlier this year where I was maybe having like 2 or 3 conversations a week with partners on a particular topic and saying, we want to get this in the NDC, we want to get this in the NDC. And it's fantastic because I think it helps to bring the right actors into the conversation when we're talking about climate action. It's a whole of government, it's a whole of society process. And it touches on all of these different aspects. And so we need to be looking at these opportunities. The downside, maybe, is that the NDC then kind of includes everything and it becomes I don't want to say a wish list, but it you know, the more that's in there, the more difficult it is to action. So the point is, I think it's really great that we have some references in the NDCs, but the implementation is actually where I see more opportunities. And I wanted to share some figures because through the NDC partnership, all of the, there's some numbers on our wall, but I think 108 countries who are requesting support currently. We categorize all those requests, so I can tell you the sectoral breakdown, the regions, the key topics. We have tags for agriculture and food systems. So we don't have a food loss waste tag, but I can tell you broadly for agriculture and food systems. And as you would expect, nearly all countries are requesting support on these topics. So 81 out of 103 that we have there. But actually, one of the interesting things I was looking at is just over the last 5 years, the number of requests in that sector have increased 6-fold. So it's growing. It was already a huge topic, but it is growing in importance. And these requests are mostly related to financing. There are some references to food loss and waste, but I have to say that most of them are quite generic references. A lot of the times we see requests that it will mention it kind of in passing it, or will mention it as a kind of a high level activity. And this is where we really rely on partners to come in and to work with countries to actually elaborate what are the opportunities that are there, because that's the hook. And that we can tell you where countries are potentially interested. But then you coming in and providing that expertise and working with them to say, these are the opportunities. And I thought the numbers and the examples were fantastic, because this is exactly how you bring it in and you innovate and you use this as an opportunity to raise ambition. So I don't think we have countries or many countries in the audience with us today, but I do really want to encourage, and this is something I can bring back as homework as well, working with our team, but encouraging countries to be thinking about this as an opportunity, and one that they might not have explored, and particularly thinking about the co-benefits that it brings as well, because a large part of what we do through the NDC partnership is supporting countries in the implementation of their NDC, but not for the sake of climate action. In fact, the climate action is secondary, it's the development that is primary. And so any way that we can make that argument or that we can give that evidence is just so invaluable. And I really appreciate the food for thought that you gave today. The last thing I wanted to share is we're actually starting a new work program for the NDC partnership. So the next 5 years. And so this is also a really interesting opportunity for us to think about how we better tap into some of those networks that are available. And I know we have a long-standing relationship. Cecil brings us into a lot of conversations, which I really appreciate because it opens up access to these partners and these experts. But how do we better leverage that? And how do we better connect the dots with the countries that we're working with and help to support you in this agenda? So just to say thank you and really looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Amanda. This is great. And maybe I should say we actually did make efforts to have government speakers on the panel in case you wonder. No, you can. Thank you again, Amanda. And I just want to say we did try to have government speakers on the panel, but not only that, many delegations seem to be a little bit smaller this time, but also, of course, they're very busy with the negotiations, and it's very unpredictable from one day to the next when they will be available. But we're very happy we had this conversation. If I can have a follow-up question to you, Amanda, and then I want to open the floor. Maybe we have time for two questions or so for discussion. Now, two scenarios, because more than 100 countries have submitted their NDCs. So country A, food loss and waste, is in the NDC, and we heard sometimes it's under waste, sometimes it's under food, sometimes it's under circular economy, whatever matters most in the country, right? This is your country-driven processes. So country A has it in there. Seems quite clear what civil society can do. You can come in, you can offer support to government. What to do in countries where there's no obvious connection? What's the next step in the NDC? So the NDC submitted to the UNFCCC. What comes then? I think many people have so focused on the NDC that sometimes it's less clear on what the kind of operationalization of those concerns. And of course, the magic word is implementation. So NDCs are not implemented directly. That would be weird. What are the next steps? Maybe you can help give us a little guidance and to the listeners about what to do if you are in a country where there's no obvious hook to put in.
I'll get closer. So what I would say is actually looking at from your perspective, what are the entry points? So every country is going to be looking at different sectors. So if they've looked at agriculture, or they're looking at waste or circular economy, looking in the NDC and seeing what the priorities are. And I think you're the experts who can then identify, well, if you're doing this or you're interested in this or your emissions profile is this is an opportunity to look at. Because a lot of what we see as these opportunities grow or as our expertise grows, countries aren't keeping up with all of it. It's hard to know all these different opportunities that exist. So I would look at those different sectors and kind of dig in from there. And this is something that we can also support as well, because we might not have all the details on what's happening in the country, but we can at least tell you from a sectoral perspective where countries' priorities are, and that could potentially be an entry point to look at.
Thank you so much. And to say something that you implied, obviously this is not something that only concerns food loss and waste. That's, as NDCs are meant to be whole of government, this is true for any sectoral and subsectoral area. So we're not special. And this is something that needs to happen. And I think we all heard your offer to take the opportunity of your next work program to explore what that could look like, because all of us need to shift or emphasize more the focus on the pragmatic side of this. This is less about policy formulation. Many countries have policies in place, they have language in place, and it's more a question of getting into it, learning as you're doing, building the data, and so on. Wonderful. We have 5 more minutes. Questions from the audience or from colleagues that want to specific questions to specific speakers or to the panel as a whole? Yeah, please. If you can introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, I'm Angelo. I'm from Canada. And I'm from an organization that's called Montreal International, but I'm just here out of personal interest on this topic because I had some time. My question is, so in priority action number 4, there's a point on reducing food waste at the household level and improving nutrition. And I was just wondering, when you collaborate with the food industry, who often wants to extend shelf life by using additives, so, wasting less food by it lasting longer, how do you combine not wasting food but also improving nutrition? Because they seem at odds in some ways. By using additives, it's less nutritious, but then you also, it gets wasted less. So I know it's a complex question because it's so layered and stuff with food. So yeah, that was my question.
It's a very good question. If you can allow me to even broaden it, maybe, the issue of policy coherence, right? That seems to be very typical for food loss and waste. It goes in all directions and it gets very specific. Who wants to have a first stab at it? Dana.
I can. Yeah. This is a hot topic in the US where processed foods have become a really big topic. It's okay. So, my answer to the direct question would be freezing is, one way. I think it's a big question, right? There is a trade-off between extending shelf life and not waste and having things be perishable, right? And so I think nutrition is part of that trade-off sometimes, and at other times there are things like freezing and canning where you don't actually lose that much nutrition. But to the larger question of just policy coherence, I think for where we're at right now, we're sort of like, we have 15 things that could be a good policy on waste. And we'll take any of them, right? And we're looking at not so much where do food waste policies cohere, but where can food waste be part of a different policy that's already going. I think one of the things about having so many co-benefits is you can benefit waste reduction without ever saying the word climate or methane or waste even, right? Because it can be, to give you an example, about food date labels and consumer confusion and having people just get better money out of their food, right? And dealing with high food costs. So when you can find ways that you can insert food waste into policy, whether it's in an NDC or the many other policies that happen, I think that can be a real success because it gives the sponsors of that policy another talking point for getting it through, and it helps you get something done.
Thank you. Maybe that was a great answer. One more question if there is one. Otherwise, I would say we close it for today. No? Okay. So thank you so much to our panelists, to Amanda from the NDC Partnership, to our partners in the Global Action Drive. Maybe I should pull this up if you want to look us up. There is no website for the Global Action Drive. This is part of the Champions 12.3, where you can find us, and there was a QR code where you can find the specific document that speaks to the importance of integrating food loss and waste into climate plans and policies. You can see we didn't say just NDCs because it's true for other policy documents. And importantly, every country has its own domestic strategies and policies. So I think that's in a way what you, all of us, not as a way to summarize, but I think implied by all of you, engage with the process, engage with NDCs, not just with your own fellow experts, engage with the broader process. And something I think I picked up from what Raphael said, and I think I've heard it from all of you a bit, it shouldn't be that hard on waste. It should be easier. There is a wickedness about the issue whether it's the way it's organized in government, whether it's maybe society's not willing to address waste issues. There's something about it I think you all seem to speak to, and that is that it's much harder to reduce food loss and waste, even though it's a no-brainer to actually make that happen. But we heard a lot of evidence, we see a lot of progress. Something maybe illustrative of the broader climate question, there has never been more done to address food loss and waste, and yet it's insufficient. So let's work all together. Thank you for everyone who watched live. We will also put the video on one of the websites, and you can approach any of the experts directly. Thank you so much.